Right, let's do it. Let's talk about The Batman. I have been anticipating this film for such a long time. There's a lot of things to cover that I'd like to speak about. My general blanket statement for The Batman is... it's very good. It's not, however, without its flaws, which I will go into a bit more detail throughout the video. For the most part, it is a very, very good film, and there's a lot of promise ahead for Matt Reeves' version of the Caped Crusader and the world that he's created. First off, right, let's talk about Batman himself, Bruce Wayne, played by Robert Pattinson. Never a shadow of a doubt in my mind that he was going to give everything to this. He has, had his critics. It's unjustified, I think, because he's had such an exciting career outside of Twilight. He's taken a lot of risks. He's worked with a lot of brilliant minds, like he's worked with Cronenberg, he's worked with Robert Eggers. His career has gone on a very interesting path to what you perhaps would have expected it to after Edward Cullen. But he's brought something to Batman, which I don't feel I've seen with a Batman performance before. Obviously, Bruce and Batman kind of have to be broody, but here Pattinson goes for such a grungy, emo, loner, outcast type vibe to him, and it really suits. He doesn't have an awful lot of dialogue with other characters here. A lot of his speech comes from narration, and I think it works very, very well here. It's quite Rorschach-esque. Overall, it blends pretty well with the film noir vibe the film has. It seems to draw heavily from film noir, in my opinion, in its structure, the amount of dialogue that's in the film, because there are huge chunks of the film that are taken up with just setting the scene, doing the investigation towards the Riddler, talking about the history of certain characters and their relationships together. So I think the narration works perfectly here, but his interactions with other characters, they're not always smooth. He's got a lot of edginess to him. I mean, they even use Nirvana in the soundtrack with Something in the Way. And I believe Pattinson came out and said when he was preparing for the role that he listened to these kind of very moody, very melancholic songs to kind of get him in the headspace for becoming this character. So the fact that they've fed that type of music into the film to complement it works very well. I think that Pattinson plays Batman and Bruce very similarly. Normally you get a duality between the two of them, so that Bruce appears a lot more normalized than obviously Batman is. But here, Batman and Bruce are very sheltered, enigmatic, and they're just oddball, and it fits really well because we know that Bruce has had such a challenging backstory in his childhood, and if you carry that with you through all your life, it's gonna make you a really scarred person, but also have, in a sense, kind of social problems. Like, you kind of get the vibe with his version of Bruce that he's not all that connected to other people. He doesn't have a member of family. Even his relationship with Alfred is quite unconnected. Like, they don't feel totally grouped as people in the same way that Michael Caine's Alfred was to Christian Bale's Bruce. Here, there's a constant static between them that complements the way Pattinson plays Bruce. And generally speaking, as both Bruce and as Batman, he's got a really expressive performance. I think he's the most visually expressive Batman we've had. His facial expressions he uses are just so beaten down and disheveled, and he's got like a lot of demons that he carries with him, and he's become something that he necessarily doesn't want to. He is an animal, he describes at one point, because he spent pretty much 2 years as Batman in the dark. He's become like nocturnal, and that's just rewired his brain into becoming a creature of instinct, really, rather than something totally human. And that, for me, just blends with the world that Reeves has created and the Gotham that he's created perfectly. To go off against Batman in this film, we do have the Riddler, who is Edward Nashton. Awesome casting with Paul Dano. He's wonderful in everything he's in, and it's about time that he's been given a role of this magnitude to really shine. He's not in it an awful lot, and that's one of my kind of gripes with it. I understand why they've done it that way, though, because the Riddler is very much a background character where the things that he does and the impact he has on Gotham is seen through through the eyes of the victims and it's seen through the eyes of the investigators. Whereas we, the audience, we get a couple of moments where he's going around killing people. We get some video footage, what he's been streaming online and things like that. And then towards the end, we get our few scenes where he's actually face to face with Batman. And he gives a cracking performance in all the scenes he's in. It's kind of overacty here and there, but purposefully. And he kind of draws a little bit on the Jim Carrey Riddler in his performance while still remaining completely like freakish and maniacal. And I think that concept for the Riddler fits, again, the world that's being created. Dano went away and he took a lot of inspiration from the Zodiac Killer, which is apparent here. A little bit of inspiration from the Jigsaw Killer, from the Saw films as well. And I think that the lack of screen time for him here almost fits hand in hand with the way that Hannibal Lecter is shown in The Silence of the Lambs, or how Kevin Spacey's shown in Seven. I actually think that this film has some similarities to Seven, with the, very big interconnected investigation into a twisted, smart, cryptic killer who we see very little of, but when we do see them, they are the centerpiece of whatever scene they're in. And also, Seven has quite a lot of rain in it, and so does this. There is an awful lot of rain in Gotham. I think that this Gotham is gorgeous. It's got such a stormy, gloomy, corrupt, dangerous aura to it that gels amazingly well to the script and the themes. Alongside the Riddler, we get our secondary villain, who is the Penguin, played by the almost unrecognizable Colin Farrell. Again, great performance. He's kinda in parts doing his best Robert De Niro, but again, that's just sort of what the Penguin character is anyway. It's wonderful makeup, a great costume on him. I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes in the future of this Batman series. I believe they're doing a mini-series through HBO for the Penguin, which I'm very interested in. But yeah, he does great, and the scenes he's in, again, he nails it, but almost another scenario where I would have liked to have seen more of him. He's the second in command to Falcone, who is pretty much the main villain of the film. Like, he's not the main villain, the Riddler's the main villain, but he's the biggest on-screen presence in terms of villainy. And that was kind of another bugbear of mine. Like, I get that this movie is more grounded in reality, but I don't really care about Falcone. I never have. I've never considered him to be a villain. He's just a bad guy who is essentially a mob boss. And it does fit with the world, but I was never really that bothered about the backstory with him, the backstory with him being Selena Kyle's father, the backstory about Thomas Wayne, the backstory about Don Maroney, like all that kind of stuff. I wasn't really intrigued by. I just wanted to see more Penguin and more Riddler, but a huge chunk of the film dives into that portion of the story. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of lost me in parts where I was tapping my foot a little bit. I just want this to pick up now, please. Speaking of Selena Kyle, I think she's done well. I think that Zoe Kravitz is a good casting. She works well alongside Pattinson. You can see they already have a good chemistry on screen together, and all the kind of press stuff they've been doing about the movie, they've been connected to each other quite well. And she's established into the world decently, she's a good version of Catwoman. And another alliance that we see is Jim Gordon, not Commissioner Gordon at this point. Our commissioner is Pete Savage, but it's kind of being set up for Jim Gordon to take the commissioner's job in either a second or a third movie. But he's played by Jeffrey Wright here, who is awesome. And I think that Wright and Pattinson have brilliant chemistry together themselves as well. There's a lot of awesome scenes where, they're interrogating people, particularly when they're interrogating the Penguin, and they're kind of doing a bit of good cop, bad cop, and going back and forth, asking questions. It works brilliantly, and I think that the pair of them are quality. There's the great scene where Batman's in the interrogation cell, and Jim's like, everyone clear out, I'll talk to him, and they just sort of formulate a plan for Batman to punch him and escape, but Batman absolutely bollocks him round the jaw, and then the next scene they meet up, Jim's like, come on, you could have pulled your punch, man. Batman's like, I did. Like, that sort of thing. There's 2 or 3 very subtle, humorous moments in the film, just to break it up a bit, and it's nice when those moments connect. Alfred's good as well. Andy Serkis, he's not in an awful lot of scenes, but I do like him. He's got that more almost militaristic vibe about him. You can sense with kind of the scar on his face, the way he carries himself as a person, that he's got the same sort of vibe about him that Sean Pertwee has in the Gotham series. And again, he's just perfectly cast. The entire cast of this film is excellent, to be fair. And that leads me on to my next point, which is a big talking point for a lot of people. It's the Joker scene at the end of the film. Now, when I initially saw this scene, I couldn't work out who it was. I had heard the rumours that Barry Keoghan was going to be playing him in a cameo, but I kind of put that in the back of my mind and didn't think twice about it. Then when I came out of the cinema and looked it up, I was like, of course it's Barry Keoghan. He's got such a distinctive face. It's that kind of structure that he's got to his appearance that is just a great blueprint for the Joker character. He's such a good actor. He is oddly magnetic in everything he's in. Comic book fans will mostly recognize him at this point for playing Druig in Eternals, but if you want a film where you can see, okay, this guy is the Joker, watch The Killing of a Sacred Deer, where he actually acts alongside Colin Farrell, funnily enough, and he's even worked with Christopher Nolan in the past as well. He was in Dunkirk. He's a cracking actor and is going to be an exceptional Joker, I have no doubt, but I'm kind of stuck in this duality of opinion where as soon as the cell next door to the Riddler, the voice comes from it, I was like, oh, who's it going to be? Who could it possibly be? I'm really excited to see who they've got lined up for the future films. And when the word clown was mentioned, I kind of just sank back in my seat and went, oh, again? The Joker by this point, I think is undeniably the most popular villain ever, right? Surely he's got to be. There's been that many variations of him, and for the majority, everyone who's ever been cast as the Joker has knocked it out the park. You'll probably notice that I've said the majority of, not all of, there, by the way, Jared Leto. In fairness, the, Snyder Cut gave him an opportunity to prove himself, and he did quite well there, to be fair. But that's just my point. There's been countless bloody variations of this character now, especially where we're at a point where the Snyder Cut didn't come out that long ago, so we had Leto there. We've got Joaquin Phoenix in Joker, which is getting a sequel. Rumour has it that there's going to be Willem Dafoe as the real Joker in that. And then we've got a brand new Joker here with Barry Keoghan. We've got the Joker from Gotham, the TV series, which I know that's finished now. But it's just we've got so many Jokers scattered about the world now. And I'm far more interested in seeing new villains that haven't been tackled in live action before, at least on the silver screen. There's some villains that Gotham has done, the TV series, which I would like to see done in a film format. And I think that Matt Reeves' Gotham is the perfect playground for certain villains. I do not think that from what Reeves has said and kind of what Pattinson said as well, that they would ever go down the route of the more fantastical characters like Poison Ivy, like Scarecrow, like Mr. Freeze, like Clayface, which is a shame because I think a Clayface film would be great. But there are plenty of quote-unquote grounded Batman villains that would slot perfectly into this world. There's total scope for them to do Deathstroke, to do Deadshot, to do Black Mask, to do Hugo Strange, obviously to do Two-Face, who personally I think they should build up to be the main villain of the third film of a trilogy. I know that Pattinson's mentioned he'd love to have a movie based on the Court of Owls storyline. That would be really, really cool. But I have heard hearsay that they're interested in doing The Long Halloween, which, if you aren't aware of the original graphic novel, essentially works as a Two-Face origin story where multiple other Batman villains have an appearance. I think that could work. I mean, even The Batman starts on Halloween night. So could the second film also start on Halloween night with the Joker's kind of origin into this world, and then the third movie taking it into the long Halloween? That would be quite a cool idea. I mean, there's plenty other characters. I would absolutely love Professor Pig to appear in one of these movies in a good-sized role. The way they did him in Arkham Knight is just this movie, and would definitely work with the fact that this is very much a horror film. There are so many horror elements to it in terms of the fact that pretty much the entire film takes place at night. The entire film's dingy. Batman himself is presented in a very scary way, probably the scariest Batman there's ever been, where he lurks in the shadows and we have these looming shots that focus on the shadows and he just emerges very, very slowly from them in his heavy boots. He is a fearful person. And then combined with, the grittiness, the goriness of having thumbs dismembered and all that sort of stuff, Professor Pig would be brilliant here. I'd also love to see a serious version of the Mad Hatter on screen, but I think that's a bit too fantastical for this world as well. So my overall thoughts for the Batman are that the cast are exceptional. Everyone gives it their all. I'm a lot more excited about where this world can go rather than necessarily what it did in this film. I think that the Batman will be seen in hindsight in years to come as a great establishing film for a trilogy. I think that the film goes into its film noir roots and detective roots a lot more than any other Batman film has done before. It essentially just does feel like a David Fincher crime movie with Batman in it. That's just the entire vibe that I get from it. And it works. It really does work. However, I do think there were some elements to the overall plot that kind of started to drag here and there. That's just my personal preference. But now I know the entire plot fleshed out start to finish. Upon repeat viewings, I'll probably see the film a lot differently and be a lot more positive about it than I am currently being. Not that I'm not being positive. It's a damn good film. But on the whole, I am incredibly satisfied, and for the future, I would love them to take some more original directions, introduce some villains that have never been seen on screen in a Batman film previously before, to get some exposure on them and make them, household names. We don't necessarily have to keep rehashing villains we've already seen before, and even though I'm delighted with the casting of the new Joker, I think it's just a bit either too soon or a bit unnecessary. Even though that character fits with the world, I hope it doesn't become fatigued by the time it rolls round. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of The Batman. I've been Connor from Unleash the Ghouls, and until next time, watch the killing of a sacred deer.